Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In, recorded on July the 24th, 2024. I'm your host, Robert Swarthout, and I'm joined by my co-host, Andres Sandate. How's it going, Andres?
Hey, good, Robert. Good to see you again. Hope all is well.
Yeah. I am I'm home alone now. My wife decided that it was too warm and admittedly probably too wet in Atlanta at this point. So she packed up 4 of her horses and headed to Idaho for a month. So I'll be going out and see her in a couple of weeks, but it went from crazy hot to crazy wet.
I know. Yeah, this last
quickly.
few weeks. I was going to ask you, the Teton Pass, there's a portion of the highway that collapsed. Have they created an alternate route? Because I know some of the folks that would work in Jackson would come in from Idaho.
Yeah. So they have that opened the very tail end, like last couple of days of June. So that's open. They basically just made it was a bit of a hairpin turn, kind of a sweeping hairpin turn. They kind of just made it a little bit of a tighter corner to kind of cut off the part on the outside that was messed up.
Yeah.
They claim it's a temporary fix. I could also be convinced that it eventually becomes the fix. And they kind of remove the temporary part. I've driven on it. You can't really see any sort of difference outside of brand new pavement, and they got concrete barriers kind of keeping you on the road over there while they assess the situation. So
yeah,
but it does have a lot of traffic there. It takes people through the pass that otherwise you would have to go much further south, and it turns, maybe a 1 hour drive into a 2.5 hour drive if you couldn't use it. So important corridor for that part of the country.
Right. Yeah. Well, crypto making headlines as always. Lot to cover today.
Yeah,
although not a lot of data points, just a lot to cover.
Yeah, it's been a lot of other news the last week. Obviously, a crazy world that we're in, at least here in the United States right now. And crypto's, I wouldn't say taking a breather, but it's definitely not been many new, I guess, quantity of headlines, as you kind of alluded to. A lot of stuff in the news over the last week with politics, and some of it kind of bleeds into what we're talking about here. Is our first point with the Winklevoss twins donating, each of them donating 50 million. No, soon be
500,000.
500,000. My math
in Bitcoin.
In Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So they donated that to a super PAC that is supporting John Deaton's attempt to unseat Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a single Senate seat that needs to have a different person in it, it is her seat, in my opinion. She is the brainchild that is all the anti-crypto policy that comes out of this current administration. I don't think there's any sort of original thoughts around crypto, good or bad, coming from the president or the vice president. It's purely what Elizabeth Warren wants and decides that her desires are, from everything that I've read.
And she chairs the powerful banking Senate committee, right?
And she just has too much influence, and admittedly is, I could talk all day about my view on career-long politicians, but we need some new blood there. We need new thinking, not just because we want it to be positive, but just purely like the actual step back and see what might be good for America, versus just being crypto bad. We need to make it go away type attitude. So
she does seem to have Gensler and the head of the FDIC. Is it Greenberg?
Yeah.
Sort of on speed dial, in a way. I think this has come out in the news, they're her lapdogs, I think, as one opinion piece I read this morning stated, and continue to, have a stance and a position that is going to, really prevent the industry from getting clarity and probably leading, the globe around innovation.
Yeah, it's just, we've talked many times about it, but it's just ironic the approach that the U.S. has taken to crypto so far, considering it is the world financial center in New York, and specifically just as a country, to think that somehow this new technology is not going to be part of the American way of doing it, and we can put our head in the sand and still be the leader. Maybe that is not the intent. Maybe you don't want to be the leader anymore. Maybe they should say that. It may be a little less confusing.
But this is another example of influential, deep-pocketed players in the digital asset space, putting their money out there to support specific candidates with very pro-crypto positions.
Yes.
And Deaton has a deep history
Yeah.
in the space, so he's obviously friendly and well known to the industry.
Yeah, he made his name, with being the amici counsel in the SEC v. Ripple case. He represented, I think, a total eventually, the number is like 75,000 XRP holders kind of joined in with him. And he went from being nobody's a name that anyone would recognize unless you were an asbestos lawsuit, to being an attorney that learned securities along the way, I think. And over the course of 3.5, 4 years, became quite internet/crypto famous. And obviously he's maybe making a bit of a career pivot of sorts to try to be a politician. And the super PAC that was set up that the Winklevoss twins donated to, Ripple also donated $1 million. And there was another, gosh, his name I'm drawing a blank on, another crypto attorney that was on Twitter during the whole lawsuit stuff. He's the one that set it up in support of John. So, we'll find out the result of this come November. But it's, an interesting twist to it all, because I've followed that Ripple case so closely to see someone that I feel like I know. I've never met the guy, but I feel like I know him, to kind of see him potentially going on and maybe fighting a bigger fight here. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, second headline, the speaking of Ripple, the SEC and Ripple case potentially nearing an end. I know there's an important hearing it's scheduled for this week, closed door hearing. The SEC's got scheduled.
They got punted from last Thursday. The rumor is there's settlement talks. I actually don't believe it personally, but I think people are trying to make sense of a timeline. The timeline we're in right now is the remedies portion of the case, waiting for Judge Torres to kind of give her ruling on what the remedies should be. I don't understand why Ripple would settle at this point if they feel like, if you read what they've said publicly, they're very positive. Like they certainly feel like they have the upper hand. Like, why would they settle unless the SEC is going to give them a better deal than they feel like the judge is going to? And why would the SEC do that now? The SEC just wants to drag this out. It's been pretty obvious for a long time. So we're in that kind of, I wouldn't say dark period, or, no speaking period, but we are in a period where we're just waiting for the judge. Her ruling could come out, 5 minutes after we stop this podcast today. So we'll see. We're close. So, but if I had to place a wager, I would say that Ripple's total, whether penalties, and all basically any money that they may owe at the end of this, I would say it's less than $100 million, probably maybe in the 50 to 75 million if I had to throw a dart at the wall and hopefully hit something. So,
considering their legal expenses over the last several years,
they're probably approaching 200. Yes,
right. They're probably a multiple of that, so that might not be a bad penalty.
Yeah, and just to have the case behind them, I think that they'd be in some ways happily pay that. It's essentially, since the SEC is also asking for close to $2 billion, that number would be a rounding error of what I suggest. So we will see, hopefully soon, and maybe we could finally put this behind us once and for all, and assuming nobody decides to appeal.
What's your take on the impact of a positive ruling? Let's say they pay a fine, but it's nowhere near the 2 billion number. It's in that 50-100 million range. What is your overall take on the impact that a sort of favorable outcome, Ripple saying, hey, I want to get this behind us. We want to put this behind us and move forward. The SEC, of course, puts out its press release saying, oh, we got $200 million from them. But at the end of the day, it's probably a win for Ripple. What's your take on the impact of the broader industry? And then, whether it's XRP specifically or clarity for digital securities?
I think that any sort of broader impact was had last July in 2023 when she came out with the ruling saying, at the time, again, this whole case has never been about the broader industry. People have been trying to apply it in different ways, but she said that XRP in and of itself is not a security. It's all about how it's packaged and sold and resold or whatever. But the stuff, XRP that you'd buy in, at the time you couldn't, but you can now buy it on Coinbase and whatever US exchanges. That is not a security. It obviously doesn't come with any rights outside of just owning the token. So I don't think that impacts the industry. I think that at this point, the impact you might see is Ripple actually be able to use XRP within their software for US-based businesses. I think they said something like 95% of all the business they've signed customers up to since the lawsuit started has been overseas. So that's like December of 2020. It's there's always long been rumors that there's big banks, Bank of America being one of them, that is waiting to use it for cross-border payments. Time will tell, but I think you might see a price spike in the short term with a ruling from Judge Torres that doesn't put Ripple out of business. I don't see how that would happen at this point where they would go out of business. They're spending money on acquisitions and other stuff that if they felt they were nervous about to have to pay a big fine, they probably wouldn't be spending that kind of money. So we'll see. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this thing, and I'm ready to think about other things. So,
yeah. Well, we'll have hopefully some news to report back over the next few weeks. All right. Well, moving forward, so an exciting, I guess, another exciting milestone. Not to overlook the the obvious, but obviously that this transaction of BTC getting approved, everybody immediately after BTC ETF started trading, everybody immediately started asking about when is Ethereum ETFs going to start trading. So bring us up to speed on the launch, and also who's gathering all these assets.
Yeah, so we were talking about the Ethereum ETF, I would say almost weekly back in late May or early June, and we thought it was coming. Then all of a sudden, there was a quiet period, then it finally came. So I guess to bring us up to today, today being July the 24th, on July the 23rd, yesterday, Tuesday, the ETFs for Ethereum were able to start trading in the U.S. And they had a rather good day. If you compare the first day of Bitcoin trading to the first day of Ethereum trading, I believe it was, let me get my number right here. It was 83%. So the first day of trading for the new 9 Bitcoin, they did 720 million. And the first 8 in the trading day for the first 8 Ethereum ETFs on the first trading day did 590, so 83%. That's well above what I would have ever guessed. There was a lot less fanfare. It's almost like it started launch with a whimper. And I think long term, there's no way that it holds that same percentage. To me, I would be, maybe I'll have to come on here and say I was wrong, but I just don't foresee that being the case. But it was good inflows, and net inflows of 106 million across all 9 of them. If you include the Grayscale mini trust that converted in their assets in, they still have a 2.5% fee. Everyone else is in the 0.2 to 0.3 range. Some maybe
20, 30 basis points.
Yeah. But if you exclude the Grayscale numbers, just all of them from yesterday, the 8 ETFs had inflows of 590 million. So good day, and we will see how it kind of plays out over the next weeks or months. But it's
it's got it's got to be looked at by the industry as a positive, right? I mean, there's any way you sort of slice it, I think the good thing in all of this is that they didn't come out with a whimper, right? If they had launched to 20, 30, 50 million, I think a lot of people would have said see. But the fact that they raised attracted so much capital, I think demonstrated there were a lot of people following the launch. And any early indications about sort of who is there any sort of leaders? Is it the same kind of names of who's gathered the most assets across those new ETFs?
So we'll throw Grayscale aside. iShares, the BlackRock one, had inflows of 260. Wait, am I looking at the right thing? Yes, 266 million.
Yeah.
The second place position would have gone to Bitwise at 204 million, and then it quickly drops off to third place at Fidelity. But yeah, it's early days, and the part that surprised me was how much of the Grayscale Trust, or now ETF, for Ethereum was sold. 5% of the holdings left in the first day. Like heavy. Obviously, if you go from 590 down to 106 million, you see that's Grayscale had a huge impact, at least on volume. And 5% of holdings leaving in a day basically says no thank you to the 2.5% fee. It'd be interesting to see how long it takes to bleed down. So Bitcoin, their Bitcoin Trust, now ETF, went from, I forget how many billions in assets, but it halved in about 90 days, if I'm not mistaken. So this may be on a similar trajectory. So
yeah, I mean, fees matter to the people that are index investors or mutual fund investors, that to suggest that they're asleep at the wheel and not paying attention to fees, like especially when it comes to these indexes, and you can get them 10x cheaper. You know, especially if you have an advisor or somebody knowledgeable at the controls watching this stuff. It's yeah, there's no doubt that, you know, the assets are going to outflow to a less expensive product. Well, I saw Matt Hogan from Bitwise for the second time at a lunch, and we were talking about, amongst a group of advisors and other investors, you know, the pending launch of the ETF from Ethereum, and he was optimistic. But I think even if they raised 50 or 75 million, would have been ecstatic. So the fact that they pulled in at Bitwise over 200, and now have, at least after one trading day, the second largest exchange traded fund on the Ethereum side, you know, says a lot. So that's so that's another one that we're going to need to follow, because that comes on the heels of some big wirehouses and some advisory platforms approving BTC right for allocation into client accounts. So it'll be interesting to see what the timeline is for these ETFs to get approved.
Yeah, you know, the part that I was thinking about the other day, so these are launched, well, at the time they were about to launch, but, you know, now that they're launched, you know, it's Bitcoin launched in mid-January, and we're still seeing these warehouses in many cases not have them on the platforms yet for advisors. So call it 6 months later, you're still not having it. Is there still going to be the same kind of delay for Ethereum, or are they going to start doing these at a much quicker clip and getting them on the platforms so advisors can do some diversity, if they want to do some diversity within this asset class, versus just saying, well, digital assets is Bitcoin, which I guess works for a short period of time, but once there's other products, it becomes a little more challenging, I guess. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, and some of these, you know, some of these advisors, I think now that there's a second ETF out there, I think the question comes to that advisor who gets the phone call, you know, about the person reading the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or watching CNBC, and they keep seeing, you know, these tickers, they keep seeing, you know, more talk about crypto, they keep hearing, you know, on their favorite news channel, politicians taking views, super PACs raising money. Like, it's just, it's going to eventually lead to that conversation with the advisor about, like, what are we doing here on digital assets? So I know I'm getting as an advisor, I'm getting a flood of inbound information about the case for Ethereum, why you should pay attention. There's a lot of education opportunities out there for advisors and people managing money. And I'm going to be surprised if we don't start to see some of these platforms approve Ethereum's ETFs quicker than it has taken to get the Bitcoins approved.
Yeah, you know, it's the model so far seems to be you need to have a futures market that's trading, that's liquid, all that kind of stuff. Basically through the CME, and then you can apply for a spot market. There's no other tokens currently that even has a futures market. It sounds like there's futures markets coming for XRP. There's been some talk of Solana one, but admittedly, I can't imagine they get a spot without having, at least with this SEC in place, this SEC line of thinking, I guess I should say. So we'll see. It's a ever-changing market, but the rules are not clearly defined. So
yeah,
we think we understand the rules at least. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, still a lack of regulation and a lack of clarity continues to be one of the big hurdles for the industry. I was going to say one final piece. I had the head of the funds group at Jersey Finance, which is a jurisdiction off the coast of France, on my podcast, the ATL Alts podcast yesterday, and we were talking about jurisdictions and why managers, particularly those in the US, are choosing Jersey to set up an offshore fund.
Okay.
Well, in Europe, if you want to raise capital in Europe, if you're a US based investment manager, you have to follow a set of regulations that effectively are there to, protect the investor, the consumer, et cetera. Well, all these rules and regs make it quite difficult for managers to navigate. It's quite complex. So a lot of managers will choose to go with an offshore jurisdiction like Jersey, which is not a part of the EU, and not say work around the regulations, but they get a way to sort of apply regulation light type protocols.
Okay.
And in this conversation, we just talked about innovation, and ultimately what I kind of came to conclude after the hour was, investors are going to find ways to invest. Investors have found ways to invest in digital assets. They're learning how to open up accounts. It's cumbersome. It's complicated. They're going to eventually, I think, go to advisors that support their desire to invest in crypto. I think that over time, you're going to see more and more of that adoption. And in the case of, like I said, jurisdictions, the big driver for business for why managers go there versus Cayman versus Ireland versus these other jurisdictions is they can provide certainty and clarity to the manager and the manager's investors. In these other jurisdictions, that's just not the case. And the only way they got there is because private industry, regulators, and government all worked together at the table to try to come up with some sort of sensible legislation and sensible policies. And as a result, they're attracting a ton of business from managers that want to raise capital in Europe. And I don't know, I thought about that and said, man, that's how we should do things here in the US with crypto. But we just make it hard. We just we do it, but we try was it the famous quote? The US will try every other approach before
trying the right one.
Trying the right one. Yeah. So that's us.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I just look forward to a day where policy is not the driving narrative around an industry's lack of growth or hampering to growth. And I think that we might be, I don't know, a year and a half out from, if we get a new administration, having the ability to kind of have some more fair rules. So we will see.
I think when you zoom way out, there's a really good article that came out. I have to pull the publication, but it talked about regulation of the internet back, in the first 15 or so years of the internet, as these big platforms, Google, Meta, Amazon, as they got bigger, we started to see, regulation kind of take shape. Now, it didn't kill those industries, and there's certainly challenges with the internet, but because there was a willingness to sort of put regulations in place, you look at some of the largest tech companies in the world, with the exception of a couple in Asia, they're in the US.
Absolutely.
Right now, the opportunity exists for that same thing to potentially happen with digital assets, crypto, digital, blockchain. But without regulation, those big winners, those bigger platforms, the next Meta, the next Amazon, could be offshore.
Right, and it's not just like that they're here in the U.S. For jobs. It's the wealth that they create for the employees, and obviously shareholders can be worldwide, but like the wealth for the employees and then the money that they spend in their communities. I mean, like it has, this word gets overused a lot, but trickle down effects. There's a lot of that happens in that kind of scenario. So we're hopeful, I guess. So the last point we have here, kind of back on ETFs real quick, is the Bitcoin buying, the ETF buying has picked up. There was net outflows in mid-June, at the tail end of Q2. Q2, as we talked about last time, was not a fun quarter for crypto. Bitcoin in the month of June saw a 20% sell-off just by itself. And typically all coins are more magnified in the up or down position. But it's a, if you look at the chart of it, it's, the second week of June was the bottom. And then literally it's been up to the right. It's not quite parabolic, but it's 45-degree angle. So it's cool to see. That's, we are not going out of business, and we can start. Hopefully the plan plays out through the end of the year. So.
Right. Do you do you have thoughts about what has brought buyers back into the market? Is it just attractive price point, or is there something?
I think it's price point. And I think admittedly around that time, that's when former President Trump made part of his platform that he was crypto positive. Prices were positive that week, and just generally the sentiment in the news cycle around crypto changed around that time. It felt like, oh my gosh, we have someone that actually is listening to us. And there's millions of people that are crypto holders, and I can't imagine there's many undecided voters in the country at this point, but maybe there's some, and maybe people are willing to be a single issue voter, or a single number of issues voter. So we will see. It's I really don't care what these politicians say. It's all about the actions, and we just need to kind of we need something different. I don't care who brings it at this point. So.
Well, I think we're going to see over the next several months a lot more politicians, at least in competitive races, asked what is their view, what is their position, what do they plan to do with crypto? Because I think the idea that you can just sort of say, well, we got to protect the general public and have this sort of talking points I think it's beyond for that particular type of voter. I think the voter that's completely unfamiliar with crypto, completely unsure what it is, how it works, they may not be even close to beginning to want to buy it. So I think it's much more about that voter. And the question is, are they a swing voter? Are they a voter in a competitive race? The states that are going to be up for grabs, at least when it comes to the presidential election, historically it's places like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona. So we'll see. There's crypto holders everywhere now. So
there is. And admittedly, Georgia is a purple state. Was blue last time, but very much purple. Historically red. So we'll see if it ends up being another swing state. So awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In. If you want to stay updated on future episodes, you can find us in any podcast player by searching Teton Crypto Capital or Weekly Crypto Check-In. Take care.
Take care, everyone.